President Biden and his use of autopens, specifically on pardons. I know that big question, though, was President Biden aware of how often his signature was being used and what it's being used for? Not necessarily, and I do think you got to stop getting in the weeds here of whether it's okay or not to use the autopen. As we know, it has been kind of part of standard operation for a very long time.
That's right. The big news item here is that Trump's Justice Department is examining pardons issued by Biden. And this is Ed Martin, the Justice Department pardon attorney, wrote in an email, and several news organizations saw this, were privy to it, that the investigation involves whether Biden was, quote, competent and whether others were taking advantage of him through the use of autopen or other means. So Trump's Department of Justice right now is reportedly looking into many of these last day pardons. Some of them were the preemptive pardons against for his family, in favor of his family.
Some as he was walking up during the inauguration, they were dropping.
That's right. Trump. And once again, that in and of itself is not abnormal in a presidency. What's abnormal is all the reporting that we've seen about the mental state and the decline of President Biden. And I'm about three-quarters of the way through the original sin. 3/4 of the way through the original sin. And what even is coming out of that is that the running from the basement kind of meme about President Biden in 2020 was a reality. And honestly, the people around him saw a decline even while he was running for president the first time. The Office of Legal Counsel at the Department of Justice had a memo in 2005, and that was actually authored by an individual who was at the DOJ, now is a federal judge that was appointed by President Trump. So this isn't someone on the left or something like that. But this memo was to kind of flush out the legal theory whether it was constitutional for a president to use an autopen or some other device to sign legislation. And why this is important, because people will say, well, we're talking about pardons, we're talking about EOs. The only thing in the U.S. Constitution that requires a signature from the president is legislation.
Right.
That lays out the process of House and Senate pass it. It goes to the president for a signature.
We've always discussed whether the president can almost speak things into existence. Can you declassify by just saying, this is declassified? Because the Constitution, as you said, and our laws don't necessarily say they have to have a live, wet signature.
Right. And what the Office of Legal Counsel decided in 2005, and this standard practice, is that even signing legislation, what is required to be signed by the U.S. Constitution, is fair game for autopen. Because if the president has made the decision and told a subordinate to affix his signature, his or her signature, to that legislation, that is within the constitutional requirements of signing it. Now you get to the question about executive orders. Executive orders aren't explicitly mentioned in the Constitution for obvious reasons, but they come under the president's power through the take care clause, that the president shall take care of faithfully executing the laws of the country. And that manifests in many ways. One of those ways are executive orders. So while they are signed, there isn't a constitutional requirement that an executive order be signed by a president. And then the third thing, pardons. You get into and you say, okay, if he signed these pardons and didn't know about it, is it valid? Well, pardons are very simple as well. And this is kind of like the declassification argument, where pardons, it just says that the president shall have power to grant reprieves and pardons except in the case of impeachment. So that doesn't say can sign a pardon in the text of the Constitution. That goes to that broader question.
Can pardon.
Can a president who has the power to classify just say declassify? That's actually an argument President Trump made about the classified documents issue.
I believe so.
Right.
I would argue that, yes.
We've argued that there is broad power within the executive. Here's the concern for me, is that by this president looking back and trying to add limits to the executive power before him, when many of them, pardons can't be undone, but executive orders, you don't need to decide whether he was competent or not. You can just do away with them.
Re-executive order the executive order.
Exactly, very easily. Now, the pardon issue, if you start to put limits on the president's power from the previous president by saying he wasn't cognitively okay. He didn't know about it. One, I don't think that's ever going to be provable in a court of law, because now we have all the evidence that he was declining from all the reporting. But there is a remedy in the Constitution for someone that is president and unable to fulfill their duties.
Look,
25th Amendment. That was not invoked. So now we're already seeing the case in the media that President Trump isn't fit for office. He's in a state of mental decline. What happens to all the January 6th protesters that were pardoned by President Trump, or the Chrisley family that was just pardoned by President Trump? If under the next administration they try to do this,
you just say you're mentally
and say,
unclear.
We don't think he was mentally fit for office. They've been arguing that for years. Therefore, his pardons don't matter.
Yeah,
that's the slippery slope I see on this issue.
It's too slippery of a slope. It's too dangerous, and it's a waste of time. If the big question, as you said, Will, is something that's kind of undefinable, which is, was Joe Biden, we can all say, as you've been reading that book, you can all say, look at it and go, he was not probably able to do this. But if we start peeling back that onion, the ramifications are huge.
That's right. And in reality, and many people are pointing out the Hur report from the special counsel Robert Hur, which during that he said he would not be able to convince a jury that President Biden was anything other than a well-meaning older gentleman with a poor memory.
Yep.
And that he wouldn't be able to bring this before a jury because they would see him as sympathetic, and that he wasn't fit to stand trial, is kind of the way that people talk about this. But we need to also remember, we fought against special counsels investigating the president as well. What Robert Hur did was decline to prosecute after the president would have left office, because he would not have been able to prosecute him while in office, and made a decision that once he was at that age, would not have been able to secure a conviction, nor would it have been worth the time of the Department of Justice. Now, if people had done their constitutional duty and read that and thought he is unfit for office, and take that with the context of everything that they've done. 25th Amendment, Section 4, something they tried to talk about that President Trump should have had used against him, is where the vice president and a majority of either the principal officers of the executive departments or other such body as Congress may by law transmit to the President pro tem of the Senate and the Speaker of the House their written declaration that the President is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, and the Vice President shall immediately assume the powers and duties of office as acting President. Then the President can respond, and then it takes a 2/3 majority to permanently put the Vice President in as acting. No one did that. Kamala Harris didn't do that. None of the people that were cabinet members that in this book are saying, like, he wouldn't even talk to us. He tried to minimize our contact. They had that constitutional power and didn't use it. If that is the case, that they believed that, they were asleep at the wheel. They didn't do what they could have done if they truly had the best interest of the country at heart by saying he is not able to do this. Instead, they left someone who was president of the United States in office and continued to go down this path. So I don't think, though, that starting to put limits on the executive that is elected after the fact is a smart path to go down at this point in this country.
We are so excited to announce the ACLJ's brand new app, completely redesigned to provide you with the best tools available to partner with us at the ACLJ. You can watch the daily Seculo program, sign the petitions, customize your ACLJ membership experience, donate with the click of a button, and receive up-to-the-minute critical updates that the mainstream media can't censor. Just scan the QR code on your screen or go to your phone's app store, search ACLJ, and click install. It's that simple.